Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something pretty wild. Imagine waking up tomorrow in medieval London, like not as a tourist, not with your phone and credit cards, but actually trying to make a living there. Could you hack it? Would you thrive or just barely survive? Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to London in the 14th century, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. So, congratulations. You just woke up in medieval London. The year is 1348, and you're lying on a straw-filled mattress. Not the plush memory foam you're used to, but a lumpy sack stuffed with straw that pokes you in weird places. There's a scratchy wool blanket over you, and the whole room smells, well, let's just say interesting. Smoke from last night's hearth fire still hangs in the air. There's the unmistakable scent of the River Thames wafting through the cracks in your wooden shutters. And trust me, that's not a good thing. The Thames in medieval London was basically an open sewer. And then there's the earthy smell of the straw beneath you, which gets changed maybe once a season if you're lucky. Your ears pick up the sounds of a city already awake, a rooster somewhere nearby, the clop of horse hooves on dirt streets, and voices, so many voices, merchants already calling out their wares, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral ringing prime, the first prayer service of the day. It's around 6 a.m. and London is already buzzing. You sit up, your back complaining about that lumpy mattress, and look around this tiny room. If you're lucky, you've woken up in a craftsman's house, a narrow timber-framed building that rises 2 or 3 stories high. The ground floor might be a workshop where you'd practice whatever trade you've magically acquired in this time travel adventure. The upper floors would be for sleeping and living. So, that's the good news. You have a roof over your head and possibly a trade. The bad news? Well, you've arrived in London in 1348, which happens to be the year the Black Death first hit England. About half the population is going to die in the next few years. But hey, if you survive, wages are going to go way up due to the labour shortage. So there's that. You swing your legs off the bed and your bare feet touch the packed earth floor. No hardwood, no tile, just dirt, maybe with some rushes scattered on top if you're doing all right for yourself. It's cold, it's damp, and you're hungry. Let's talk about what your breakfast options might be in medieval London. Forget coffee, forget your avocado toast. The average Londoner in the 14th century started their day with a chunk of bread and maybe some ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. Water wasn't trusted, for good reason given how polluted it often was. Weak ale was the everyday drink consumed by everyone, including children. The bread would be coarse and heavy, made from maslin, a mix of wheat and rye. If you're poor, your bread might be even rougher, made from barley or oats, and it would be dark. The white bread we take for granted was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. If you're doing well, you might have a bit of cheese with that bread. If you're doing very well, maybe an egg or some salted fish. But for most Londoners, it was bread and ale, day in and day out. You chew your dense bread, washing it down with room-temperature ale that tastes nothing like modern beer. It's weaker, for one thing, cloudier, less carbonated, and flavoured with herbs instead of hops, but it does the job of waking you up and filling your belly. Now you need to figure out how to make a living in this strange, smelly, vibrant city. The first thing to understand about making a living in medieval London is that it was a city ruled by guilds. These weren't like modern unions, they were more like clubs or brotherhoods that controlled who could practice certain trades, set standards for quality, and maintain monopolies in their particular crafts. By the mid-14th century, London had over 100 different guilds, and if you wanted to work in most trades, you needed to be a member of the appropriate guild. Some of the major ones included the mercers, cloth merchants, grocers who sold spices and other goods in bulk, drapers who sold cloth retail, fishmongers, goldsmiths, skinners, merchant tailors, haberdashers, salters, ironmongers, vintners, and cloth workers. Each guild jealously guarded its monopoly. If you tried to set up shop as, say, a goldsmith without being a member of the Goldsmiths Guild, you'd find yourself in trouble real fast. Guild members would report you, and you could face fines or even imprisonment. So, how do you join a guild? Well, there were three main paths: apprenticeship, patrimony, being the son of a guild member, or redemption, basically buying your way in if the guild allowed it. For most people, the journey began as an apprentice. Parents would pay a master craftsman to take their child, usually a boy, though some trades did accept girls, and teach them the trade. The apprentice would live in the master's house, receiving food, lodging and training in exchange for their labour. This arrangement typically lasted 7 years, though some trades required longer. As an apprentice, you'd start with the most basic tasks: sweeping the workshop, fetching materials, watching and learning. Gradually, you'd be trusted with more complex aspects of the craft. An apprentice blacksmith might start by just pumping the bellows, then move on to helping hammer out simple items before eventually learning to forge more complicated pieces. Apprenticeships weren't easy. The hours were long, dawn to dusk, 6 days a week. The work was often physically demanding, and masters had almost complete authority over their apprentices. Some were kind and fair, others were harsh taskmasters who used their apprentices as cheap labour. Running away from an apprenticeship was a serious offence, and apprentices who fled could be hunted down and forced to return. But if you stuck it out for those 7 long years, you'd become a journeyman. Now you could work for wages, either continuing with your master or finding employment with another craftsman. You weren't yet a full member of the guild. That status, known as becoming a freeman or gaining the freedom of the city, usually required creating a masterpiece to prove your skill, paying a fee, and being accepted by the existing members. Once you became a freeman, you could open your own shop, take on apprentices of your own, and participate in guild governance. The most successful guild members might eventually become part of the livery, the elite of the guild who wore special clothing, livery, and wielded significant economic and political power in the city. This guild system created a relatively stable social structure with clear paths for advancement, but it also excluded many people. Women were generally limited to certain trades like brewing, silk making, or various aspects of the textile industry. Immigrants faced barriers to guild membership, and the poor often couldn't afford the fees associated with apprenticeship or guild membership. So, what if you weren't in a guild? What were your options for making a living in medieval London? You could work as unskilled labour. The city always needed porters to carry goods, labourers to help with construction, or servants in wealthy households. These jobs paid poorly. A labourer might make 2 to 3 pence per day compared to a skilled mason who could earn 6 pence or more. But they required no special training or guild membership. You might become a huckster, a small-scale retailer selling food or other basic goods from a stall or basket. Many women made their living this way, selling fish, fruits, vegetables, or bread. It wasn't lucrative, but it could keep you fed. If you had a bit more capital, you could try your luck as a brewer or baker. These trades were less tightly controlled than many others, partly because the city needed lots of bread and ale to feed its growing population. Brewing, in particular, was often a female occupation in the early medieval period, though by the 14th century it was becoming more male-dominated as it became more commercialized. For those with education, there were opportunities as clerks, scribes, or teachers. The church also offered career paths from parish priests to monks and nuns, and the growing royal bureaucracy needed literate administrators, or you could turn to less reputable professions. Medieval London had its share of beggars, thieves, prostitutes, and con artists. The city's criminal underworld offered quick money for those willing to risk harsh punishments if caught. As you ponder these options, standing in your small timber-framed house, your stomach growls again. That bread and ale breakfast only goes so far. You need to get out into the city and figure out how you're going to earn your daily bread, quite literally. You pull on the clothes you find in a wooden chest. No closets in medieval London, just chests or pegs on the wall for your limited wardrobe. For a working person, that wardrobe would be simple. A linen shirt or shift as your undergarment, wool hose or stockings for your legs, a wool tunic or gown as your main garment, and maybe a hood or hat. Leather shoes, if you can afford them, or perhaps wooden clogs. Nothing has zippers, elastic, or synthetic fabrics, of course. Everything is secured with laces, buttons, or pins. Dressed in your itchy wool clothing, you step outside into the narrow, winding streets of London, and immediately you step in something unpleasant. There are no sewers in medieval London, no regular trash collection. People simply throw their waste into the streets, where it mixes with animal droppings from the horses, pigs, and dogs that roam freely. The stench is overwhelming at first, though you'll eventually get used to it. Everyone does. The streets themselves are narrow, sometimes just a few feet wide, and twist unpredictably. There's no grid system here. The city grew organically over centuries, buildings packed tightly together, often overhanging the streets as each story juts out beyond the one below. This creates a dark, almost tunnel-like feel to many streets, with just slivers of sky visible overhead. But despite the dirt and darkness, the streets are alive with activity. Merchants call out their wares, apprentices dash on errands, craftsmen work in open-fronted shops, giving you glimpses of bakers sliding loaves into ovens, blacksmiths hammering at glowing metal, or tailors stitching fine garments. You make your way toward the heart of the city, where you're most likely to find work opportunities. London in 1348 is still largely contained within its Roman walls, though suburbs are growing beyond them, especially to the west toward Westminster, which is technically a separate city where the royal government is based. Within the walls, the city is divided into wards and parishes, each with its own character. Cheapside is the main market street, lined with shops selling luxury goods. Around the massive Gothic bulk of St. Paul's Cathedral, you'll find booksellers and scribes. Near the river are the wharves, where ships unload goods from across England and beyond. Wool, wine, timber, furs, spices, and countless other commodities. The Thames itself is the city's main highway, crowded with boats of all sizes, from tiny rowboats to larger vessels that ply the river carrying goods and passengers. London Bridge, the only bridge across the Thames in the city, is a marvel, lined with shops and houses that make it feel more like a street than a bridge. As you wander these bustling streets, you notice that many areas are dedicated to specific trades. Street names reflect this specialization: Bread Street, Milk Street, Fish Street, Ironmonger Lane, Threadneedle Street. This clustering of similar businesses wasn't just tradition. It was enforced by guild and city regulations which required certain trades to operate in designated areas. You pass through the shambles where butchers slaughter animals and sell meat. The street runs with blood and offal, and the smell is intense. Nearby you see tanners working with hides, another smelly profession that uses urine and dog feces in the tanning process. These noisome trades were often pushed to the city's edges to minimize their impact on other residents. In contrast, you also pass goldsmith shops displaying dazzling jewellery and fine plate, or drapers selling colourful imported silks alongside local woolens. The wealth on display in these establishments is staggering, a reminder of the vast inequality in medieval society. Speaking of inequality, as you walk, you notice the stark differences in how people are dressed. The wealthy merchant in his fur-trimmed gown and fashionable pointed shoes, the respectable craftsman in a good quality but plain wool tunic, the labourer in patched, faded clothing, and the truly poor in ragged garments that might once have been owned by someone far wealthier. In medieval London, you could tell someone's social status at a glance just by what they wore. You also notice something else. Everyone seems to be working, children as young as 7 serving as apprentices, old men and women still plying their trades as long as their hands remained steady enough. Medieval London had no retirement plans, no social security. You worked until you couldn't, and then you relied on family or charity. The bells of the city's many churches mark the hours, dividing the day into segments for prayer, but also serving as timekeepers for labour. Work begins at prime, around 6 a.m, and continues until vespers, around 6 p.m, with breaks for meals. It's a long workday by modern standards, though the pace might be less frantic than what you're used to. There's no assembly line speed here, no productivity algorithms tracking your output. But there's also no paid vacation, no weekends off, just Sundays and the numerous saints' days and festivals that punctuate the medieval calendar. As noon approaches, your stomach reminds you that it's been hours since that meagre breakfast. The smell of cooking food drifts from cookshops and taverns. For those who can't cook at home, which includes many Londoners living in single rooms without private kitchens, these establishments provide ready-made meals. Your mouth waters at the aroma of meat pies, stews, and roasting meats. But can you afford them? That depends on what kind of work you've found in this medieval city. If you're a common labourer carrying goods at the wharves or helping on a construction site, you might earn 2 to 3 pence per day. A loaf of bread costs about half a penny. A gallon of ale, which isn't as much as it sounds since everyone drinks ale instead of water, costs 1 to 2 pence, depending on quality. A decent meal at a cookshop might cost you a penny, so you could survive on your wages, but you'd have little left over after covering basic food, rent, and clothing. As a skilled craftsman, a mason, carpenter, or metalworker, you could earn 5 to 6 pence per day or more. This would allow for a more comfortable existence with better food, clothing, and housing. You might rent a whole house rather than just a room, eat meat regularly rather than just on special occasions, and even save a little if you're careful. The real money, though, is in trade and commerce. Successful merchants dealing in wool, wine, spices, or luxury goods could become tremendously wealthy. The richest merchants might own multiple properties, wear silk and fur, eat exotic imported foods, and wield significant political power through their guild connections and loans to the crown. But that kind of success usually required capital to start with, and also luck, connections, and business acumen. For most newcomers to London, like you, the path would begin much more humbly. As you consider your options, you shift a little, finding that perfect spot in your bed. Your muscles relax, settling deeper into comfort while you drift through the crowded streets of medieval London, watching craftsmen at work in their shops. A carpenter planes a piece of oak, curls of wood falling to the packed earth floor. The steady rhythm of his work continues as you move past his shop. Your footsteps fall into the same comforting cadence, tap, tap, scrape, as you explore further into the warren of streets that make up London's craft districts. You notice that most workshops are small, just a master working with maybe 1 or 2 journeymen and an apprentice or 2. Mass production doesn't exist here. Everything is made by hand, piece by piece, with techniques passed down through generations. There's beauty in this slow, methodical approach to creating things. No rush, just steady, focused work. Your attention is drawn to a cluster of buildings where the air shimmers with heat. This is Smithfield, where metalworkers of all kinds ply their trade. The constant ringing of hammers on anvils creates a strange music that echoes through the narrow streets. Sparks fly as a blacksmith shapes a piece of glowing iron, his face shiny with sweat despite the cool spring air. "Need work, do you?" the blacksmith calls out, noticing your interest. He's a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks and a beard singed in several places. "My apprentice ran off last week, couldn't handle the heat." He laughs at his own joke, a booming sound that matches the rhythm of his hammer. And just like that, you're faced with your first potential job opportunity in medieval London. But before you can answer, let's consider what working as a blacksmith's apprentice would actually mean. Blacksmiths were essential craftsmen in medieval society. They made everything from nails and hinges to tools, weapons, and armour. The trade was respected and relatively well paid. A master blacksmith could earn 4.5 pence per day. Not wealthy, but comfortable by medieval standards. But the work was brutally hard. The heat of the forge was intense, especially in summer. Burns and injuries were common. The physical demands, swinging heavy hammers, moving metal and coal, meant blacksmiths needed tremendous strength and stamina. And while the apprenticeship offered food, lodging, and valuable training, it meant 7 years of serving essentially as the blacksmith's property, with little freedom and no wages. You hesitate, feeling the blast of heat from the forge wash over you. Your modern body, unused to such physical labour, might not be up to the challenge, and besides, there are other opportunities to explore. You thank the blacksmith but move on, your body naturally finding a more comfortable rhythm as you continue your exploration. The tension in your shoulders eases a bit as you leave the oppressive heat behind. Next, you find yourself in a different district where the air is filled with a very different smell, the yeasty aroma of brewing ale. Medieval London was dotted with brew houses, many run by women known as alewives or brewsters. Brewing was one of the few trades where women could achieve some independence and financial success. You pause outside a modest building where a woman is supervising the transfer of a golden liquid from a large copper vat into wooden barrels. Steam rises in the cool air, carrying that distinctive malty scent. "Looking for work?" she asks, wiping her hands on her apron. "I could use another pair of hands. My daughter's with child and can't lift the barrels anymore." Brewing might be a better option for your modern sensibilities. The physical demands, while still significant, aren't quite as brutal as blacksmithing, and the brewing industry had several advantages in medieval London. For one thing, everyone drank ale, men, women, even children. Water was often unsafe, and ale provided both hydration and calories. A typical medieval person might consume a gallon of weak ale per day. That meant steady demand for brewers' products. Additionally, brewing required relatively little specialized training or equipment to get started, making it accessible to newcomers. Many households brewed their own ale for personal consumption, but commercial brewing could be profitable, especially if you developed a reputation for quality. The downside, by the 14th century, brewing was becoming more regulated and commercialized. The older pattern of small-scale brewing by alewives was giving way to larger operations run by male brewers organized into guilds. Competition was increasing, and profit margins could be slim. Still, working for an established brewster would provide immediate income and valuable skills. You might earn 2 to 3 pence per day as a brewery worker, plus potentially free ale. Not a bad perk. As you consider this option, you feel your feet settling more comfortably on the packed earth of the street. Your breathing naturally slows to match the rhythmic bubbling of the brewing vats, but there are still more possibilities to explore. You thank the brewster and continue on your way. The next street you turn down is alive with colour and the soft rustle of fabric. This is the domain of London's textile trades, a major economic engine of medieval England. Wool was the country's primary export, and cloth production employed countless people in a complex chain from raw wool to finished garments. You pass shops where dyers work with great vats of coloured liquid, transforming plain cloth into vibrant hues. The smell is pungent. Many dyes used urine as a fixative, but the results are beautiful. Blues from woad, reds from madder, yellows from weld, and dozens of other colours created through careful combinations and processes. Nearby, weavers work at looms, the shuttle flying back and forth with hypnotic regularity. Spinners twist wool into thread, their fingers moving with practiced precision. Fullers stomp on wet cloth to clean and thicken it, while shearmen use giant scissors to trim the nap to an even length. These textile crafts were organised into various specialised guilds, each jealously guarding its particular part of the process. The work was less physically demanding than blacksmithing or brewing, but it required dexterity and attention to detail. A weaver notices your interest and beckons you closer. "Ever worked a loom?" he asks, not pausing in his work. When you shake your head, he nods thoughtfully. Could still use help, though, carrying cloth, running errands, learning the trade bit by bit. Proper apprenticeship would be 7 years, but if you're quick to learn... The textile industry offers yet another possibility. As an unskilled assistant, you might earn only 1-2 pence per day to start, but there would be clear paths for advancement if you showed aptitude, and the demand for cloth was reliable. Everyone needed clothing, from the simplest shift to the most elaborate ceremonial robes. The steady back-and-forth movement of the loom is almost hypnotic. You find yourself swaying slightly in time with it, your muscles relaxing into the gentle rhythm. There's something soothing about the repetitive nature of the work, despite its complexity. But before you can decide, your stomach growls loudly, reminding you that it's well past midday and you still haven't eaten. The morning's bread and ale are long gone. You need to find food, and that means spending some of the few coins you've discovered in your pocket. This gives you a perfect opportunity to experience another aspect of making a living in medieval London, the food trades. Following your nose, you soon find yourself in a street lined with cookshops. These are essentially the fast food joints of medieval London, places where prepared food could be purchased for immediate consumption. They catered especially to single people, travellers and workers who lacked cooking facilities in their lodgings. The tantalizing smells make your mouth water. Meat pies with flaky crusts, pottage, thick stews of vegetables and grains, sometimes with small amounts of meat for flavour, fresh bread still warm from the oven, fish both fresh from the Thames and preserved with salt. You approach a stall where a ruddy-faced woman is selling small meat pies. "Penny each," she says briskly. "Fresh made this morning. Pork and onion." You hand over one of your precious pennies and receive a small, still warm pie in return. Finding a relatively clean spot to sit against a wall, you bite into your lunch. The crust is coarser than modern pastry, made with maslin flour, a mix of wheat and rye. The filling is simple but flavourful, seasoned with salt and what you think might be a hint of sage. As you eat, you observe the food sellers around you. Like brewing, food preparation was often a female occupation in medieval London. Women worked as bakers, brewers, fishmongers and poulterers. They sold fruits, vegetables, dairy products and prepared foods like your meat pie. These food trades offered reasonable opportunities for women to earn independent incomes, though rarely wealth. A successful cookshop owner might make 3 to 4 pence per day in profit after expenses, not enough to live luxuriously, but sufficient to maintain a modest household. The regulations around food were strict, however. The assize of bread and ale set prices based on grain costs. Bakers who sold underweight loaves could face public humiliation in the pillory. Food quality and honest measurement were taken seriously in a city where food scarcity was an ever-present concern. You finish your pie, licking the last bits of savoury filling from your fingers. Your belly is a little less empty now, though one small pie is hardly a feast. Still, it gives you energy to continue your exploration of potential livelihoods in this medieval metropolis. Your next discovery is a noisy, crowded building from which spill both raucous laughter and the smell of ale much stronger than what you had at breakfast. This is a tavern, one of hundreds scattered throughout London, offering drink, food, socialisation and sometimes lodging. Taverns were vital social institutions in medieval cities. They served as meeting places, informal business offices, entertainment venues and information exchanges. News and gossip flowed as freely as the ale and wine. Running a tavern could be quite profitable. Unlike brewers, who primarily produced ale for consumption elsewhere, tavern keepers sold drinks at retail prices for on-premises consumption, allowing for better margins. They also often offered food and lodging, creating multiple revenue streams. A successful tavern keeper in 14th century London might earn 6 to 8 pence per day or more, comparable to a master craftsman in a respected trade. But the business required capital to start. You'd need a suitable building, furnishings, stock, and usually employees. It wasn't a trade you could easily enter without resources. Working in a tavern was another matter. Servers, cooks and other tavern employees could earn 2 to 3 pence per day, plus meals and sometimes tips from satisfied customers. It wasn't prestigious work, but it provided immediate income without requiring special skills or guild membership. As you contemplate this possibility, you notice how the benches inside the tavern look increasingly inviting. Your legs are growing tired from walking these unfamiliar streets. You find yourself naturally shifting your weight from foot to foot, seeking comfort, much like you're doing now, settling deeper into your bed, finding that perfect position as the story continues. Just as you're considering whether to enter the tavern, either as a customer or a job seeker, a commotion down the street catches your attention. A procession is making its way through the narrow lane, led by men in colourful livery, the distinctive clothing that identified members of London's powerful guilds. This is your chance to observe one of the city's major guilds in action. You follow along as the procession winds through the streets toward a large, impressive building, a guild hall where guild members gather for business and social functions. The guilds were far more than simple trade associations. They were fraternities, social clubs, political entities, and even religious organizations. Guild members attended church together, provided welfare for members who fell on hard times, hosted feasts and celebrations, and wielded significant influence in city governance. By the 14th century, the most powerful London guilds had been organised into the Great 12, the 12 most prestigious guilds that dominated the city's economic and political life. These included the mercers, grocers, drapers, fishmongers, goldsmiths, skinners, merchant tailors, haberdashers, salters, ironmongers, vintners and clothworkers. From these guild members came London's mayor and aldermen. They controlled trade, regulated quality standards, set prices, and essentially ran the city. Joining one of these elite guilds meant access not just to economic opportunity, but to political power and social advancement. but such membership was increasingly difficult to attain unless you were born into a guild family or had significant wealth to buy your way in. The guilds were becoming more exclusive, protecting their members' privileges by limiting new entrants. As you watch the guild members file into their hall dressed in their fine livery, you realize that this level of success would be difficult for a newcomer like yourself to achieve. At least initially, you'd need to start much more humbly and work your way up over many years. The procession disappears into the guild hall, leaving you once again contemplating your immediate prospects. The afternoon is wearing on, and you still haven't secured employment or lodging for the night. You decide to head toward the river, where the commercial heart of London beats strongest. The Thames was London's main highway, connecting the city to the sea and the wider world. Ships from across England and beyond unloaded their cargoes at the wharves that lined the riverbank. As you approach the river, the streets become even more crowded and chaotic. Porters stagger under heavy loads. Carts struggle through the narrow lanes. Merchants haggle over prices in a dozen different languages. The smell of the Thames hits you, a pungent mixture of rotting vegetation, human waste, and the brackish scent of tidal water. It's not pleasant, but it's the smell of commerce, of connection to the wider world. At the wharves themselves, ships are being loaded and unloaded. Crane-like structures help move heavier goods. Teams of porters form human chains to pass smaller items hand to hand. Clerks make notes on parchment, keeping track of everything coming in and going out. This is where you might find the most readily available work in medieval London as a porter or dock worker. No guild membership required, no special skills needed beyond a strong back, just the willingness to perform hard physical labour in all weather conditions. The pay would be modest, 2 to 3 pence per day, but it was cash in hand at the end of each day. For someone new to the city without connections or capital, it represented an immediate source of income. You approach a man who seems to be directing a group of porters unloading wool bales from a ship. Looking for work, you ask, trying to sound confident. He looks you up and down, assessing your physical capabilities. Ever carried wool before? When you shake your head, he shrugs. Not difficult, just heavy. 4 pence for the day, paid when we finish, probably another 3 hours of work. 4 pence is a decent wage. Better than you expected. Enough for food and maybe a bed in a shared room at a cheap inn. It won't make you rich, but it's a start. I'll take it, you say. He nods and points to where you should join the line of workers, and just like that, you've found your first job in medieval London. The work is indeed simple but exhausting. The wool bales weigh around 240 pounds each, requiring 2 men to carry them safely. Your modern muscles, unused to such labour, scream in protest. Your hands, softer than those of men who've done physical work all their lives, quickly develop painful blisters. But you persist, gritting your teeth against the discomfort. Each bale successfully moved is 1 step closer to earning those 4 precious pennies, 1 step closer to surviving your first day in this harsh but vibrant medieval world. As you work, you learn bits of information from your fellow porters. Good places to find cheap lodging, which cook shops offer the best value, what other jobs might be available for unskilled workers like yourself. Always need men at the shambles, says one, referring to London's meat market. Bloody work, but steady. Building sites too, adds another. St. Paul's always has something going on, pays decent if you don't mind heights. By the time the last bale is unloaded, the sun is low in the sky. Your back aches, your hands are raw. But there's satisfaction in completing the job, and even more in the 4 silver pennies the foreman counts into your palm. Back tomorrow if you want more of the same, he says, not unkindly. Be here at prime. That's the first canonical hour, around 6 a.m, marked by church bells throughout the city. You nod, pocketing your hard-earned wages. 4 pennies won't go far, but it's enough for tonight. Enough for food, and a place to sleep. Tomorrow, you can decide whether to return to the docks or seek other opportunities. As evening approaches, the character of the city changes. Workers head home or to taverns. Shops begin to close. The bells of Compline, the final church service of the day, ring out across the city. Medieval London had no street lighting. As darkness falls, the city becomes a different place, dangerous for the unwary. Most respectable people are indoors by nightfall, leaving the streets to those with less savoury intentions. You need to find lodging before full dark. With your precious pennies, you have options. Limited ones, but options nonetheless. The cheapest would be a common dormitory in a poor area where you might pay a halfpenny to sleep on the floor among strangers. A step up would be a shared bed in a slightly better establishment for a penny. For 2 pennies, you might get a small private room, though it would be bare and likely infested with vermin. Given your sore muscles and the need for rest if you're to work again tomorrow, you decide to spend a little more for a bit of comfort. You find a modest inn near the river where a penny gets you a place in a shared bed, a common arrangement in medieval times when privacy was a luxury few could afford. The inn is basic but clean by medieval standards. The main room serves as both tavern and dining area, with sleeping chambers above. For an additional penny, you get a bowl of pottage, a thick stew of vegetables and barley with small bits of salt pork for flavour, and another mug of ale. The food is simple but filling, and after your day of physical labour, it tastes wonderful. You eat slowly, savouring each spoonful, feeling the warmth spread through your tired body. Around you, your fellow lodgers talk and laugh. Labourers like yourself, travellers passing through, a few locals who lack homes of their own. The conversation flows freely, touching on city gossip, complaints about work and wages, and tales that grow taller with each round of ale. You listen, absorbing information that might help you navigate this new world. Which areas of the city to avoid after dark? Which employers treat their workers fairly? What opportunities might be available for someone looking to improve their situation? After your meal, weary to your bones, you climb the narrow stairs to the sleeping chamber. The room holds 3 large beds, each meant to sleep 3 or 4 people. There's no privacy, no sheets as you'd recognize them, just straw mattresses covered with rough wool blankets. You claim your space on one of the beds, alongside 2 others who appear to be labourers like yourself. You remove your shoes, but otherwise remain dressed, both for warmth and to protect your few possessions. As you settle onto the lumpy mattress, so different from your comfortable modern bed, you find yourself surprisingly ready for sleep despite the strange surroundings. Your body aches from unaccustomed labour. Your mind swirls with all you've seen and learned about making a living in this medieval city. You've survived your first day in 14th century London, found work, earned enough for food and shelter. It's a humble beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. As you drift towards sleep in that crowded medieval inn, you feel your actual body settling deeper into your comfortable modern bed. Your muscles relax, releasing the tensions of the day, just as your medieval counterpart's tired body seeks rest after a day of hard labour. Your breathing naturally slows, deepening with each exhale as you continue to follow this journey through London's past, where tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities in the bustling streets where your breathing naturally slows, deepening with each exhale as you continue to follow this journey through London's past, where tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities in the bustling streets where life unfolds in ways both strange and familiar. Morning comes too soon, announced by the bells of prime ringing across the city. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. The straw mattress, so different from your modern bed, has left impressions on your skin, and your muscles protest as you sit up in the dim light of dawn. Around you, your fellow lodgers are also stirring. There's no lying in bed here. The medieval workday starts with the sun. You rub the sleep from your eyes and contemplate your options. You could return to the docks for another day of hauling wool bales. The work is guaranteed and 4p is a decent wage for unskilled labour, but your hands are blistered, your back sore, and you wonder if there might be other opportunities that would better suit your modern physique and knowledge. Before you can decide, your stomach growls, reminding you of more immediate concerns. You still have 2 pennies left from yesterday's wages, enough for breakfast and to keep a penny in reserve. Medieval folk knew the importance of having something set aside for emergencies, even if it was just a single coin. You make your way downstairs to the inn's common room, where a simple breakfast is available for a halfpenny, another hunk of bread and mug of ale, the standard morning meal for working Londoners. You hand over your coin and receive your food, finding a spot on a bench to eat. The bread is even coarser than yesterday's, dark and dense, with a slightly sour taste. It's filling, though, and provides the energy you'll need for another day of physical labour. The ale is thin and barely fermented, more like a weak beer than anything you'd recognise as ale in the modern world. But it's safer than water and helps wash down the dry bread. As you eat, you consider your next move. The docks offer immediate work, but you're curious about other possibilities. What else could a newcomer to London do to make a living? You decide to explore a bit before committing to another day hauling wool. With your remaining penny secure in a small pouch tied to your belt, you step out into the morning streets of London. The city is already awake and bustling. Apprentices hurry to open their masters' shops. Market vendors set up their stalls. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the less pleasant odours of the unwashed city. You make your way toward Cheapside, the main market street and commercial heart of medieval London. If there are opportunities to be found, they'll likely be here or in the streets branching off from it. Cheapside in the 14th century is a broad, bustling thoroughfare lined with shops selling all manner of goods. The name comes from the Old English seep, meaning market, and indeed it's a shopper's paradise if you have the money. Goldsmiths display gleaming jewellery, mercers sell fine imported silks, grocers offer exotic spices from the Far East. But you're not here to shop, you're here to find work, and your attention is drawn to the side streets where the real business of the city takes place. Each specialises in particular trades, their names reflecting their focus: Bread Street, Milk Street, Wood Street, Ironmonger Lane. You turn down Bread Street, where the warm, yeasty smell of baking fills the air. London's bakers were vital to the city's food supply, producing the staple that formed the foundation of most people's diets. Bread wasn't just a side dish in medieval times, it was the main event, providing the bulk of calories for ordinary folk. The baking trade was strictly regulated. The assize of bread set prices based on grain costs and specified standard weights for loaves. Bakers who cheated their customers by selling underweight bread could face the pillory, a public punishment where the offender was locked into a wooden frame with holes for the head and hands, exposed to public ridicule and abuse. Despite these risks, baking offered a decent living. A successful baker might earn 4 or 5 pence per day in profit, enough to maintain a comfortable household. And unlike some trades, baking didn't require guild membership to practice, though the most successful bakers did join the Bakers' Guild for the protections and privileges it offered. As you walk down the street, you notice a commotion outside one of the larger bakeries. A harried-looking man is arguing with a younger assistant while a line of impatient customers grows. "What do you mean he's not coming back?" the baker demands. "I've got 3 ovens to tend and deliveries to make." "Got a better offer from a baker in Westminster, didn't he?" the assistant replies with a shrug. "Said he was tired of your shouting." The baker notices you watching and eyes you speculatively. "You looking for work?" he calls out. "Know anything about baking?" And here's another opportunity. The baker clearly needs help, and while you may not know medieval baking techniques, you might know more than the average 14th century Londoner simply from watching modern cooking shows or reading about food history. "I'm a quick learner," you reply cautiously. The baker grunts. 3p a day to start. If you're any good, might go up to 4 after a week. Need someone to make deliveries and help with the ovens. Not afraid of heat, are you? 3p is less than you made at the docks, but the work would be more regular and less punishing on your body. Plus it might include meals, a significant benefit when so much of a worker's wages went to food. "I'll take it," you say, seizing the opportunity. Good. I'm Thomas Baker. It's both his name and his profession. Medieval surnames often reflected occupation. Get in here and we'll see what you're worth. The bakery is a large open room dominated by 3 brick ovens built into the wall. The heat is intense, especially as you move closer to the ovens where flames lick at piles of wood. Several workers shape dough at a large table, their movements quick and practiced. Thomas explains your duties. You'll make deliveries to regular customers, wealthy households and businesses that contract with the bakery rather than sending servants to queue each day. You'll also help tend the ovens, keeping the fires at the right temperature and loading and unloading loaves with a long wooden peel, a shovel-like tool. "Can you read?" Thomas asks abruptly. You nod, perhaps before considering whether a typical medieval labourer would have this skill. Thomas raises an eyebrow but seems pleased. "Good. You can check the delivery list then. Some of my boys just memorise it, but they mix up orders sometimes." Literacy was far from universal in 14th century London. While many merchants and craftsmen could read at least a little, labourers and servants were typically illiterate. Having this skill immediately sets you apart and might open additional opportunities. Your first task is to make deliveries. Thomas hands you a cloth sack filled with still warm loaves and a scrap of parchment with delivery addresses. The writing is in a cramped medieval hand that takes some effort to decipher, but you manage. "Don't dawdle," Thomas warns. "Bread's best warm and the customers know it. And watch for thieves. A sack of fresh bread is worth stealing in some parts of town." With the sack over your shoulder, you head out into the streets of London. The addresses are mainly in the wealthier parts of the city, the homes of merchants and minor nobility who can afford to have fresh bread delivered daily. As you make your deliveries, you get glimpses into these prosperous households. Some have you come to the kitchen door, where you're met by busy servants. Others have you enter through the main door into halls decorated with tapestries and furnished with carved wooden pieces that would be antique treasures in your time. The contrast between these homes and the crowded inn where you spent the night is stark. Medieval London was a city of dramatic inequality, where extreme wealth existed alongside grinding poverty. Your deliveries complete, you return to the bakery, where Thomas immediately puts you to work at the ovens. The heat is oppressive, making the docks seem pleasant by comparison. Sweat pours down your face as you learn to judge the temperature by the colour of the flames and the feel of the heat on your face. "Not too close," warns an older worker when you peer into an oven. "Seen men lose their eyebrows that way, or worse." Baking was hazardous work. Burns were common. The constant exposure to flour dust caused respiratory problems. Fires could spread quickly in wooden buildings, and bakeries with their large ovens were frequent sources of citywide conflagrations. but there were compensations. As a baker's assistant, you're allowed to eat broken or imperfect loaves, a significant benefit when bread was the staple food. The work, while hot, isn't as physically punishing as hauling wool bales, and you're learning a valuable trade that could eventually lead to opening your own bakery. By the end of the day, you're exhausted but satisfied. Thomas counts out 3 silver pennies, your first day's wage. He seems pleased with your work. "Back tomorrow at dawn," he says. "If you're not afraid of the heat, I'll be here," you confirm, pocketing your wages. With 3 more pennies, you now have 4 in total, enough for another night at the inn, supper, breakfast, and still a penny to save. It's a small step toward financial security, but an important one. As you walk back toward your lodgings, you reflect on the day's experiences. Baking offers a stable living, but the conditions are harsh. Are there other trades that might better suit you? Your thoughts are interrupted by a commotion ahead. A crowd has gathered around a public notice being read aloud by a city official. You join the onlookers, curious about what's happening. "By order of the mayor and alderman," the official announces in a booming voice, "due to reports of a great mortality in parts east, all ships from affected ports are hereby quarantined for 40 days before any persons or goods may enter the city." A murmur runs through the crowd. You feel a chill despite the warm evening air. The great mortality can only be the Black Death, the devastating plague that ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century. Historical records indicate it reached England in 1348, exactly the year you found yourself in. The plague would eventually kill between 1/3 and 1/2 of London's population, but it would also perversely create economic opportunities for survivors. With labour suddenly scarce, wages rose dramatically. Surviving craftsmen could demand better terms. Social mobility increased as positions opened up in guilds and households decimated by the disease. This grim historical knowledge gives you a strange advantage. While others may flee the city in panic when the plague arrives in full force, you know that those who survive will enter a labour market transformed in workers' favour. For now, though, the disease is still just a distant threat. The immediate concern is continuing to establish yourself in medieval London's economy. The next morning, you return to the bakery as promised. Thomas seems mildly surprised. Perhaps he's used to new workers not returning after experiencing the heat of the ovens, but sets you immediately to work. This becomes your routine for the next several days. Rise at dawn, breakfast at the inn, work at the bakery until evening, return to your lodgings for supper and sleep. It's a simple life, but not an uncomfortable one. The work is steady, the pay reliable, and you're learning valuable skills. You also begin to build relationships with your fellow workers and the bakery's customers. Medieval London, for all its harshness, was a deeply social place. People lived their lives in public to a degree that would seem strange to modern sensibilities. Work, worship, eating, drinking, even sleeping often took place in communal settings. These relationships are important. In a city without formal social services, your network of friends, neighbours and colleagues was your safety net. If you fell ill or injured, these were the people who might help you. If you needed to borrow money or find new work, these connections could make the difference between success and destitution. One evening, about a week into your new life, you're having supper at your usual inn when a better-dressed man sits down across from you. He's wearing the distinctive livery of one of London's guilds. The grocers, you think, from the design. "Heard you're working for Thomas Baker," he says, without preamble. "Also heard you can read. That right?" You nod cautiously, wondering where this is leading. "My master needs an assistant who can read and keep simple accounts," he continues. "Current boys moving up to apprentice proper. Pays 4 pence a day to start. More if you prove capable. Interested?" This is a significant opportunity. The grocers were one of London's most powerful guilds, dealing in spices, dried fruits, sugar, and other luxury food items imported from across Europe and beyond. Working for a grocer would mean better pay, less physically demanding work, and potential entry into the lucrative world of medieval commerce. It would also mean leaving the bakery after Thomas gave you a chance. Medieval society placed high value on loyalty, and departing so soon might be seen as ungrateful. On the other hand, social mobility required seizing opportunities when they arose. As you weigh this decision, you notice how the hard wooden bench of the inn has somehow become more comfortable as you've settled into it. Your body has grown accustomed to the physical demands of medieval life, finding ease even in circumstances your modern self would consider harsh. You shift slightly, muscles relaxing as you lean against the rough wooden wall, contemplating this new prospect while the warm glow of the hearth fire casts dancing shadows across the room where... Contemplating this new prospect while the warm glow of the hearth fire casts dancing shadows across the room where patrons talk in low, comfortable murmurs, their voices a gentle backdrop to your thoughts. I'd need to give Thomas notice, you say finally. He gave me a chance when I needed it. The man nods approvingly. Your sense of obligation, even to a short-term employer, reflects well on your character. Fair enough. Tell him John Peppertree asked after you. He'll understand. Come to the Grocer's Hall on Poultry Street when you've settled with him. Ask for Master Richard. With that, he rises and leaves you to finish your meal, the possibility of advancement turning over in your mind. The next morning, you approach Thomas with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. Medieval employment didn't involve 2 weeks' notice or formal resignation letters, but common courtesy and London's tight-knit business community meant that leaving on good terms was important. Grocers Guild, eh? Thomas says when you explain. He doesn't seem surprised or particularly upset. Good opportunity, better than baking if you've got the head for numbers. He gives you a shrewd look. You're different from most labourers that come through here. More educated. Wondered how long before someone noticed. He pays you your 3 pence for the day, even though you've only worked the morning. Tell Richard I said you're honest. That means something. Coming from me. And just like that, your career as a baker's assistant ends. You thank Thomas sincerely for the opportunity and the recommendation, then head toward Poultry Street and the Grocer's Hall. The Grocer's Hall is a substantial building, not as grand as the Guildhall where the city government meets, but impressive nonetheless. The symbol of the guild, a camel laden with spices, is carved above the entrance, a reminder of the exotic trade that is the guild's business. Inside, you're directed to an office where Master Richard, a prosperous-looking man in his 50s with a well-trimmed beard and rich clothing, interviews you briefly. John says you can read. Let's see. He hands you a parchment with a list of spices and their prices. You read it aloud, carefully pronouncing unfamiliar terms like grains of paradise and galingale, exotic spices from Africa and Asia that commanded high prices in medieval Europe. Master Richard nods, satisfied. And figures? Can you reckon sums? When you demonstrate basic arithmetic, he seems even more pleased. Good. Not many can do both letters and numbers. 4 pence a day to start, as John told you. Be here at prime tomorrow. You'll work under Simon, my chief clerk. He'll show you what's needed. Just like that, you've moved up the medieval career ladder, from unskilled dock worker to baker's assistant to clerk for a member of one of London's most powerful guilds. Your literacy and numeracy, skills taken for granted in your time but rare and valuable in the 14th century, have opened doors that would remain closed to most newcomers to the city. The next morning, you report to the grocer's hall, where Simon, a thin, serious man in his 30s, explains your duties. You'll keep records of purchases and sales, manage inventory in the storerooms, and sometimes accompany Simon or Master Richard to the wharves to inspect incoming shipments. It's mentally demanding work compared to your previous jobs, but physically much easier. Instead of hauling wool or enduring the heat of bakery ovens, you spend your days in a relatively comfortable office, writing with quill and ink on parchment and vellum. The materials themselves are a window into medieval technology: parchment made from animal skins, ink made from oak galls mixed with iron sulfate, quill pens cut from goose feathers. Simple tools, but in skilled hands, they created the records that made complex commerce possible. The grocers dealt primarily in grocery, the medieval term for goods sold in bulk or by weight. This included spices like pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, dried fruits such as dates and figs, sugar, a rare luxury in medieval Europe, dye materials like alum and Brazil wood, and various medicinal substances used by apothecaries. These goods arrived at London's docks from across Europe and beyond, brought by ship up the Thames. The most exotic items came via complex trade networks stretching to the Middle East and Asia, passing through many hands before reaching England. As a clerk, you get to witness this international commerce firsthand. You accompany Simon to inspect a shipment of pepper from the Mediterranean, watching as Master Richard samples the black corns, crushing them between his fingers and sniffing critically. "Good quality," he pronounces. "Dry, fragrant. We'll take the lot." The transaction involves several £100s of pepper, worth more than a skilled craftsman might earn in a year. Such were the sums involved in the spice trade, where rare commodities could command extraordinary prices. Your work also brings you into contact with London's elite. Master Richard's customers include wealthy merchants, minor nobility, and senior church officials, people who can afford luxuries like pepper that costs as much as a day's wages for a labourer, or cinnamon that sells for even more. When these customers visit the grocer's hall to place orders, you're responsible for recording their purchases and calculating the amounts owed. It's a position of considerable responsibility, requiring accuracy and discretion. The role also provides insights into the economic structures of medieval London. You learn about the complex regulations governing trade, the tolls, taxes, and restrictions that shaped commerce. You discover the importance of credit in a society where large quantities of coin were difficult to transport and secure. And you observe the intertwining of business and politics as guild members use their economic power to influence city governance. Your daily routine takes on a comfortable rhythm. You rise with the sun, break your fast at a cook shop near the grocer's hall, your improved wages allowing for better meals, work until midday, take a dinner break, then return to work until the light begins to fade. Medieval offices had no artificial lighting beyond candles, so most business concluded at dusk. With your earnings of 4p per day, 24p or 2 shillings per week, you're now making a lower middle class income. It's enough to afford better lodgings, moving from the shared bed at the Common Inn to a small private room in a respectable boarding house. The room is still basic by modern standards, just a bed, a chest for your growing collection of belongings and perhaps a stool, but it offers privacy and relative comfort. Your diet improves too. Instead of just bread and ale, you can now afford meat several times a week, fresh vegetables in season, and occasionally small luxuries like cheese or fruit. You're still far from wealthy, but you're no longer living on the edge of subsistence, as so many Londoners did. As weeks pass, you settle into your new position and gain Master Richard's trust. Your responsibilities increase, as does your understanding of how business operates in medieval London. You begin to see potential opportunities, ways you might eventually establish yourself as more than just a clerk. One such opportunity presents itself about 2 months into your employment. Master Richard is discussing a problem with Simon. One of their regular suppliers of dried fruits from Bordeaux has failed to deliver as promised, leaving them unable to fulfill orders to several important customers. "We could try John Weston," Simon suggests. "He sometimes has stock." Master Richard shakes his head. "Weston and I had a disagreement last year. His prices are robbery besides." You hesitate, then speak up. "What about trying the vintners? They have connections in Bordeaux for wine. They might know suppliers with dried fruits too." Both men look at you with surprise. It's a logical suggestion, but one that wouldn't occur to many because the wine and spice trades operated in separate spheres despite sharing geographic connections. "Not a bad thought," Master Richard admits. "I know Thomas Vintner. I'll send him a message." Your suggestion works out. Thomas Vintner does indeed know a reliable supplier of dried fruits in Bordeaux who can provide what Master Richard needs. The crisis is averted, and you've demonstrated value beyond your basic clerical duties. A week later, Master Richard calls you into his private office. "That was good thinking with the vintners," he says without preamble. "Simon tells me you've been quick to learn the business too. How would you like to become my apprentice properly? 4 years instead of the usual 7 given your age and abilities. No wages during that time but room and board in my household and a place in the guild when you complete your term." This is a significant offer. Apprenticeship to a member of the Grocers Guild would provide entry into one of London's most prestigious and profitable trades. As Master Richard's apprentice, you'd live in his house, learn all aspects of the business, and eventually become a free man of the city with the right to trade independently. The lack of wages during the apprenticeship would be offset by room and board, and the long-term prospects would far exceed what you could expect as a clerk. It's the kind of opportunity that rarely came to those not born into guild families. But it's also a major commitment, 4 years bound by contract to Master Richard, with strict limitations on your personal freedom. Medieval apprentices were essentially part of their master's household, subject to their discipline and rules. You couldn't marry, couldn't go out without permission, and would have limited time to yourself. As you consider the offer, you're aware of how far you've come from those first uncertain hours in medieval London, from dock worker to baker's assistant to clerk, and now potentially an apprentice in one of the city's most powerful guilds. It's a path of upward mobility that was possible but rare in the stratified society of 14th century England. "I'm honoured," you tell Master Richard truthfully. "May I have until tomorrow to consider?" He nods, unsurprised by your caution. "Of course, it's no small decision." That evening, as you return to your lodgings, you pass through Cheapside just as the markets are closing for the day. Vendors pack away unsold goods, apprentices sweep shops, and the declining sun casts long shadows between the timber-framed buildings. The street that was so bustling and noisy during the day grows quieter. You can hear snatches of song from a nearby tavern, the distant tolling of church bells for vespers, the clop of horse hooves on packed earth. Medieval London had a different rhythm after dark. Without widespread artificial lighting, activity followed the sun. Most work ceased at dusk. People gathered in homes and taverns, sharing meals, stories, and companionship by firelight and candlelight. You decide to stop at a tavern for supper and to think over Master Richard's offer. The establishment is warm and inviting after the cooling evening air. A fire crackles in the hearth, casting flickering light across the room. The smell of roasting meat makes your stomach growl appreciatively. You find a seat at a long communal table and order ale and a hot meat pie. While waiting for your food, you observe your fellow patrons, craftsmen stopping for a drink on their way home, a group of merchants discussing business, a handful of labourers pooling their pennies for a shared jug of ale. Medieval taverns were important social spaces where people from different walks of life mingled and news spread. They served as informal business venues, job markets, and information exchanges. The conversations around you touch on everything from city politics to the price of wool to rumours of strange sicknesses in the port cities, an ominous reminder of the plague that historical records tell you is approaching. Your food arrives, a savoury pie filled with minced meat and vegetables, fragrant with herbs and spices. It's delicious, a far cry from the plain bread and pottage that formed the bulk of most medieval diets. Your improved circumstances allow for such small luxuries now. As you eat, you weigh Master Richard's offer. Becoming a grocer's apprentice would mean security and the prospect of eventual wealth and status. The trade in spices and luxury goods was enormously profitable. Successful grocers owned substantial properties, influenced city politics, and lived in relative comfort. But it would also mean years of subservience and limited freedom during what should be the prime of your life, and there's the plague to consider. Historical knowledge tells you it will reach London soon, killing perhaps half the population. Would being in a merchant's household increase or decrease your chances of survival? There's also the question of whether this medieval life is permanent. Are you truly trapped in the 14th century, needing to build a long-term existence here, or is this some temporary displacement that might end as mysteriously as it began, returning you to your modern life? With no way to know, the prudent course seems to be establishing yourself as securely as possible in this world, while remaining adaptable to changing circumstances. By the time you finish your meal, you've reached a decision. You'll accept Master Richard's offer. The apprenticeship provides the best balance of immediate security and future opportunity. It places you within a wealthy household, which might offer some protection when the plague arrives. And it sets you on a path to becoming a freeman of London with all the rights and privileges that status entails. The next morning you inform Master Richard of your decision. He seems pleased, instructing Simon to draw up the apprenticeship contract, a legal document that will bind you to his service for the specified term. You'll move into my house at week's end, he tells you. Simple quarters, but comfortable enough. My wife will show you the household rules. I expect diligence and discretion from my apprentices. The rest you'll learn as we go. The contract is written on parchment in careful legal Latin. It specifies your obligations to Master Richard and his to you. You'll serve him faithfully, keep his secrets, obey his instructions, and refrain from gambling, frequenting taverns without permission or marrying. In return, he'll provide food, lodging, clothing, and instruction in the art and mystery of the grocer's trade. Both you and Master Richard sign the document, which is then witnessed by Simon and sealed with Master Richard's personal seal, a lump of wax impressed with his merchant's mark. The contract will be registered with both the Grocers Guild and the city authorities, making it legally binding. And so you become an apprentice grocer in medieval London. Your daily routine changes again as you move into Master Richard's substantial house near the Guildhall. It's a timber-framed building rising 3 stories high, with a shop and counting house on the ground floor, family quarters on the first floor, and rooms for servants and apprentices under the eaves. Your room is small but private, a luxury compared to the communal sleeping arrangements of many apprentices. You share it with just one other apprentice, a boy of 15 named Will, who has already served 2 years of his term. He becomes your guide to the household's routines and expectations. Life as an apprentice is more structured than your previous experiences in medieval London. Your days follow a strict schedule set by the household's needs and Master Richard's business. You rise before dawn for prayers led by the household chaplain, break your fast with the other servants and apprentices, then begin the day's work. This work is varied and educational. Sometimes you accompany Master Richard to the wharves to inspect incoming shipments or to the warehouses where goods are stored. Other days you learn to grade and price spices, memorizing the subtle differences in appearance, smell, and taste that distinguish high-quality merchandise from inferior goods. You practice the complex calculations needed to convert between different measurement systems and currencies, essential skills in international trade. You also begin to meet other members of the Grocers Guild, forming connections that could prove valuable later in your career. Medieval business relied heavily on personal relationships and trust networks. Who you knew was often as important as what you knew. As the weeks pass, you settle into this new life with increasing comfort. The household provides better food and living conditions than you could afford on your own. The work, while demanding, is interesting and offers constant learning opportunities. And your status as Master Richard's apprentice gives you a defined place in the social hierarchy of medieval London. You find your muscles relaxing into the rhythm of this medieval life, your body adapting to its patterns and demands. Even the straw-filled mattress seems comfortable now as your limbs grow accustomed to its contours. You shift slightly, finding that perfect spot where the day's tensions melt away into the simple pleasure of rest at day's end. Your breathing slows naturally as you lie in the small room under the eaves, listening to the night sounds of the city, distant church bells, the call of the night watch, the soft murmur of voices from the street below where life continues even as darkness falls over medieval London. The next few months establish a comfortable routine in Master Richard's household. You rise with the household at dawn, attend to business during the day, and retire shortly after sunset. As was common in an age before abundant artificial light, the work is engaging, the food plentiful, and your position secure. A remarkable transformation from your uncertain beginnings in this medieval world. But as summer wanes and autumn approaches, troubling rumours begin to spread through London. The Great Mortality, what later centuries would call the Black Death, has reached England's shores. First reported in the port of Melcombe in Dorset in June, by October 1348 it has spread to London. The city's narrow streets and crowded, unsanitary conditions make it an ideal breeding ground for the disease. The first cases appear in the poorer parishes, but the plague shows no regard for wealth or status. Within weeks, it has spread throughout London, killing indiscriminately. Medieval medicine has no effective treatment for the plague. Physicians recommend aromatic herbs, bloodletting, and prayer, none of which provide any real protection. Some Londoners flee to the countryside, hoping to escape infection. Others barricade themselves in their homes. Many turn to religion, joining processions of flagellants who whip themselves through the streets, seeking divine mercy. Master Richard, more pragmatic than most, takes what precautions he can. The household is forbidden from drinking water from public wells, which he correctly suspects may spread disease. Windows facing the street are kept closed to prevent bad air from entering. Vinegar, believed to purify the air, is sprinkled throughout the house. Despite these measures, the plague reaches Master Richard's household in November. First, a kitchen maid falls ill, developing the characteristic swellings, buboes in her groin and armpits. She dies within days. Then one of the other apprentices, Will's bedmate, shows symptoms. Master Richard has him moved to an outbuilding, but it's too late. The infection has already spread. Over the next 2 weeks, the household is decimated. Will succumbs, then Simon, then Master Richard's youngest son. Each death increases the terror of those remaining, watching for the first signs of infection in themselves and others. Strangely, you remain healthy. Perhaps it's luck. Perhaps it's some immunity inherited from your modern ancestors who survived the medieval plagues. Whatever the reason, while others sicken around you, you show no symptoms. Master Richard himself falls ill in early December. You tend to him as best you can, bringing broth and clean linens, but there's little to be done. The plague, once contracted, is nearly always fatal. On his deathbed, Master Richard calls you close. "You've shown loyalty." He wheezes, his breathing laboured. "The guild, tell them I said you should have your freedom. You've earned it." He dies the following morning. His wife, remarkably, has also survived the infection. In her grief, she remembers her husband's wish and ensures it's communicated to the Grocers' Guild. Medieval guilds were pragmatic as well as traditional. With so many members dead or fled, they needed capable replacements to maintain their business and influence. Your literacy, numeracy, and the months of training under Master Richard make you a valuable candidate despite your incomplete apprenticeship. And so, in the spring of 1349, as the first wave of plague begins to abate, you find yourself granted the freedom of the city and membership in the Grocers' Guild. What would normally have required years of apprenticeship and substantial fees has been accomplished in less than a year, accelerated by the catastrophic mortality that has created unexpected opportunities amid the tragedy. London in the aftermath of the Black Death is a transformed city. Perhaps half the population has died. Entire households have been wiped out. Properties stand empty. Fields lie untended. Yet amid this devastation, economic changes are already becoming apparent. With labour suddenly scarce, wages rise dramatically. A carpenter who earned 3 pence per day before the plague might now command 5 or 6. Labourers who survived can negotiate better terms, refusing to work for pre-plague wages. The strict labour laws passed to try to control these increases, like the Statute of Labourers in 1351, proved difficult to enforce in the face of economic reality. For those with capital and connections, like newly minted guild members, the plague's aftermath offers unprecedented opportunities. Properties can be acquired cheaply from the heirs of victims desperate for cash. Businesses with deceased owners need new management. Trade, temporarily disrupted, resumes with fewer competitors for profitable routes and contracts. You find yourself in this advantageous position, though the path has been paved with others suffering. With your freedom of the city and guild membership, you're now entitled to trade independently. Master Richard's widow, recognizing your loyalty during the family's ordeal, helps you establish connections with his former business partners. One of them, needing a reliable agent after losing several employees to the plague, offers you a partnership. By 1350, you've established yourself as a modestly successful merchant in the spice trade. You rent a small property that serves as both shop and living quarters. You employ 2 servants, survivors like yourself, grateful for steady work in the uncertain post-plague economy. You've even taken on an apprentice of your own, a bright boy orphaned by the plague. Your daily life now bears little resemblance to those first desperate days in medieval London. You sleep in a proper bed with linen sheets and wool blankets rather than a shared pallet of straw. You eat well, fresh bread, meat several times a week, vegetables, and even occasional luxuries like imported almonds or wine. Your clothing is of good quality wool and linen, not the coarse garments of a labourer. You've also accumulated possessions that would have been unthinkable before: a silver cup, a few books, rare and expensive items in the 14th century, good quality furniture. While far from wealthy by merchant standards, you enjoy a standard of living superior to that of most Londoners. Your business involves importing spices and luxury goods from the continent and selling them to wealthy households and institutions in London. Several times a year, you travel to the great fairs at places like Boston or Winchester, where merchants from across England and Europe gather to trade. These journeys offer glimpses of medieval England beyond London, the patchwork of fields and forests, the scattered villages, the small market towns, and the occasional splendid cathedral city. Travel in medieval England was slow and often uncomfortable. On horseback, you might cover 20-30 miles in a day on good roads in fair weather. Bad weather or poor roads could reduce this dramatically. Accommodations along the way varied from decent inns in larger towns to basic alehouses or monasteries that offered shelter to travellers. These journeys, despite their hardships, provide a welcome change from city life and opportunities to expand your business connections. They also reinforce how much London differs from the rest of the country. Larger, more commercially sophisticated, more cosmopolitan in its mix of people and goods. By 1355, 7 years after your mysterious arrival in medieval London, you've become a successful and respected member of the merchant community. Your business has grown to include imports of wine and luxury textiles as well as spices. You've moved to a larger house in a fashionable parish and increased your household staff. You've also married the daughter of another merchant, creating useful family connections that strengthen your position in the trade networks. Marriage in medieval London was as much an economic partnership as a romantic relationship. Your wife brings a substantial dowry that allows for further expansion of the business. She also takes charge of the household management, supervising servants and apprentices, maintaining accounts, and often managing the shop when you're travelling. Medieval merchants' wives frequently played active roles in family businesses, particularly in London, where commercial opportunities for women were greater than in many parts of Europe. Your rise from penniless newcomer to established merchant has been remarkable, even in the socially fluid environment created by the plague. Yet it reflects a real pattern in medieval London's economy. The city offered genuine opportunities for advancement to those with skills, particularly during periods when labour was scarce and social structures disrupted. Not everyone was so fortunate, of course. For every success story like yours, countless others remained trapped in poverty or died young from disease, malnutrition, or accident. Medieval London was a place of stark contrasts. Great wealth alongside grinding poverty, magnificent churches alongside filthy slums, scholarly learning alongside widespread illiteracy. As the 1350s progress, London gradually recovers from the plague's devastation. New people move in from the countryside to replace the dead. Trade routes disrupted by the mortality re-establish themselves. The rhythms of urban life, the markets, the guild regulations, the religious observances, the seasonal celebrations resume their familiar patterns. But some changes prove lasting. Labour remains relatively scarce, keeping wages higher than before the plague. This creates a class of more prosperous workers and craftsmen who can afford better food, clothing and housing than their pre-plague predecessors. Social mobility increases as opportunities open up in guilds and institutions devastated by the mortality. These economic and social shifts eventually contribute to the decline of the feudal system and the rise of a more commercialized economy. The world that emerges from the plague years is not radically different. Medieval institutions and beliefs remain fundamentally intact. But subtle changes have been set in motion that will, over centuries, transform European society. Your own life reflects these broader patterns. By 1360, you've become a wealthy merchant with substantial property holdings and investments. You serve on the Common Council of London, participating in the city's governance. Your children, 2 sons and a daughter who survived the dangerous early years of childhood, are positioned to inherit your wealth and status, with apprenticeships arranged for the boys and a substantial dowry set aside for your daughter. What began as a desperate struggle for survival has become a successful medieval life story. Through a combination of skills, adaptability, fortunate timing, and yes, the privilege of knowledge from your modern perspective, you've not just survived but thrived in 14th century London. As night falls on your comfortable merchant's house, you settle into your featherbed, a luxury unimaginable during those first days in medieval London. The sounds of the city gradually quieten as curfew approaches. The watch calls the hours, their voices floating through the darkness. A distant church bell tolls Compline, the final prayer service of the day. Your body relaxes deeply into the softness beneath you, so different from the lumpy straw pallet of your early days here. Your mind drifts over the journey you've taken through medieval London's economy, from dock worker to baker's assistant to merchant's clerk to apprentice to successful trader. Each step building on the last, each opportunity seized when it presented itself. Would such a journey have been possible in another time? Perhaps. London has always offered possibilities for reinvention, for building new lives. The medieval city, for all its harshness and hierarchies, contained genuine paths for advancement that weren't available in more rural, feudal settings. Your eyelids grow heavy as sleep approaches. The weight of the wool blankets and the warmth of the small charcoal brazier that takes the chill from the room create a cocoon of comfort around you. Your breathing slows, deepens, finds the natural rhythm of approaching sleep. In these drowsy moments between wakefulness and dreams, the boundaries between past and present seem to blur. The medieval London you've inhabited these past years and the modern world from which you came begin to merge and overlap in your consciousness. Perhaps the true lesson of your journey isn't about the specific ways to make a living in medieval London, but rather about the constants of human experience across time, the need for security, the value of adaptability, the importance of connections, the balance of risk and opportunity. These transcend the centuries, relevant in any age. Your thoughts become more fragmented as sleep draws nearer. Images from your medieval life float through your mind. The heat of the bakery ovens, the smell of exotic spices in Master Richard's warehouse, the devastation of the plague, the satisfaction of building a successful business from nothing. Each memory grows more distant, more dreamlike. Your muscles surrender completely to the mattress beneath you. Your jaw softens, your hands uncurl from whatever tension they held. Even your eyelids seem too heavy to possibly open again. The sounds of medieval London fade now, replaced by the gentle quiet of deep relaxation. The weight of the day, of the years, of this entire journey through a distant past lifts away like morning mist, leaving only the perfect stillness of approaching sleep. And as you drift off into that velvety darkness, one final thought surfaces, whether in the 14th century or the 21st. The essence of making a living remains fundamentally the same, finding where your abilities meet the needs of your time and place, then building step by step from there. Sleep comes now, deep and peaceful. The medieval city continues its nighttime existence beyond your walls, but you no longer hear it. Your breathing settles into the slow, regular pattern of true rest. Your conscious mind surrenders to dreams, where perhaps you walk once more through London's ancient streets, or perhaps you find yourself back in the modern world, carrying with you the wisdom gained from this extraordinary journey. Either way, you sleep now, deeply, completely, the weight of your body melting into the bed, the tension in your muscles dissolving entirely, your thoughts slowing, then stopping altogether. Just breath, just stillness, just sleep, perfect, peaceful sleep.